The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Greetings, everyone, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Andreas Benokratis. I am a product manager for content and certification with Ansible, and I'll be your MC as well as a co-presenter for today. Now, we're really excited to have back with us the Cisco ACI team, and our webinar is entitled Cisco ACI with Ansible Collections. So really excited. Thank you so much for being here. Our other co-presenter today is Lionel Erco. He is a technical market engineer for ACI at Cisco, and he's also the team lead for as a developer for all the collections as well. So before we jump in, I also want to introduce Ravi Balakrishnan and Devarshi Shah, who are panelists. So they may not be speaking, but they will be helping to answer questions. And that's a really important part. So if you do have a question, please note that you will be on mute. Everyone is on mute, except for us, obviously. So if you have any questions, please put them into the questions area of the GoToWebinar control panel. So again, questions will go there. We'll answer them as we go. And if some are super cool, we will try to answer them in person at the very end. Reminder that this will be recorded, and I probably say this to many people. Is this recorded? Yes, this is recorded. So if you have to leave early, or if you're not seeing this yet and you come late, we'll actually have this on the Ansible webinars portion website, and we'll actually have it co-listed with the ACI team as well. So we will make sure you can get to this if you can't make it or have to leave early. This will probably be posted probably by the end of the week. We're pretty good about that, so keep an eye on that. And if you've registered, obviously, you will get notified that it's been published. So thank you again for joining us, and let's kick things off. Next slide. So we're going to talk about a little bit, we split this into two parts. So we're talking about Ansible a little bit, and then we're going to talk about the introduction into ACI. So as we move into Ansible project status, some of you may not know what's going on with Ansible itself, the upstream project, and then may not know what collections are. So we're going to talk about collections and then move into ACI, and then an awesome ACI demo. Hopefully the demo gods will be with Lionel today, and then we'll go into a Q&A if we have time. So let's just jump into the next slide. So the Ansible project, everyone hopefully knows and loves it. It's very popular. It's on the top 10 list for all GitHub upstream community projects. It is so popular that it's actually burying the project maintainers. And what I mean by that is you probably know that Ansible itself contains everything, right? Ansible 2.9 is the latest upstream GA product for the community, and it includes all of the foundational pieces to actually make Ansible work. And then it includes all content as well. So content would be plugins, modules, anything like that. When you do a pip install Ansible, you get everything. You get about 4,500 to 5,000 items. Now, that's great. It's convenient, but it's kind of difficult to maintain, right? So think of us as so since it's like make an example of ACI, every time an ACI change needs to be made, it has to be committed to the upstream Ansible GitHub tree, and then it's only released every so often as Ansible's released. So our cadence has typically been 6 to 9 months, right, between Ansible releases. Now, that's okay for stability, but if the ACI team has some new cool things that they want to release, having to actually do that and wait 6 to 8 months is really painful. So the goal here is to split out the content from the actual base executable. So you're going to start seeing, as we move forward into Ansible 2.10, we're calling Ansible 2.10 base. Ansible 2.10 base is a very slimmed down version of Ansible that has maybe about 200 to 250 items. If you're a longtime Ansible person, think of Ansible 0.9, like way back in the day, right? Very, very small, lightweight. And then we actually will have all the content as balled up into collections. So we'll talk about collections in a second. Next slide. So once you actually break this out, right? Step one was to break out the base executable from the content. The idea here is now how do you reintegrate it so that it's consumable, right? the last thing people want to do is install a base, 2.10 base, and say, I want everything, right? You're going to want that anyway. So for community members, we're still going to have an Ansible 2.10 release. It'll be shortly after 2.10 base. As of today, 2.10 base is the beta for that is slated for the end of this month, which is May, and then the be generally available upstream in July, right? So once we actually have a 2.10 base GA in July, we actually will be able to create or reintegrate all of our collections and create Ansible 2.10. So this is just a high level kind of review. If you don't know what's going on in the Ansible project, this is obviously larger than an ACI discussion. So if you're an Ansible person, it's good to know kind of what's coming from the community side. Next slide. So we talked about collections, and this is extremely important. If there's one thing you're going to have to know when Lionel starts talking, he's going to say the word collection a lot, right? So an Ansible collection, what is it, right? Exactly. It's basically a simplified and consistent content schema. Well, what is that? Okay, so you probably know what Ansible roles are, or an Ansible module, or an Ansible plugin, right? Typically, those have been kind of a very flat. It's been very flat. And if you wanted to kind of distribute that content, you had to do it individually. The nice thing about a collection is it's one abstraction higher than all of these. So a collection contains all of these artifacts that you know and love. So an Ansible collection can contain a bunch of modules, a bunch of roles, a bunch of plugins as a self-containing, contained way, portable means of distributing Ansible content. So you actually are able to standardize how this is actually organized in a very consistent way. The nice thing here is we're now moving into semantic versioning. So versioning will be moved into there. So we'll know major, minor, and patch releases. So semver will be utilized across collections, and it's very portable and flexible. So collections are the way forward. Collections are typically delivered as tarballs, and then delivered via a couple different platforms, and I'll talk about that. So before we move on, make sure you know an Ansible collection contains what was before modules, roles, plugins. All the constructs, all the things you know and use today are going to be contained within a collection. Next slide. So we now know everything about the what. So now you know what collections are, and you know how it's set up. How are you actually going to get these things, right? How are you going to actually deliver these collections if they're not part of the Ansible distribution? Well, it could be part of 2.10, but out of band, the whole idea of having a collection is to be able to update it quickly, asynchronously, and then release it to the community so that people can use it. So there's two ways of actually consuming Ansible content. The first, you probably recognize, Ansible Galaxy. This has been the traditional place for where the community goes to publish Ansible roles and have been able to download and install Ansible roles. Now, Ansible Galaxy was recently enhanced to support delivery and distribution of collections. So now Ansible Galaxy is now the de facto place directory for downloading collections as well as roles, right? This is your community supported location. It's been extended for collections, like I said, and this is where you get the latest and greatest, right? This is, you don't have to wait 6 to 8 months. You get the bleeding edge, and you can get it right away from Ansible Galaxy. So now that we have this, we had to create a new means for enterprise customers, right? As much as we wanted to cater to the people's like, I want the latest and greatest now, there are enterprise customers that say, you know what, slow down a little bit. We want to make sure that with the content that we have is stable, right? They expected the stability of the content as well as the foundational components. So what we did was we created Ansible Automation Hub, which is a managed service on the cloud.redhat.com, which actually hosts, it looks similar to Galaxy, but it hosts the certified jointly supported content by Red Hat and the partner. And this is where, so just so you know, ACI content is in both places, right? ACI is currently in Ansible Galaxy today, and it's also an Automation Hub as well. right? So Automation Hub is great for the enterprise use case. You get access to advanced analytics. If you're an Ansible subscriber, an Ansible customer, you'll start to understand utilizing Ansible Tower and Ansible Automation Hub. You can start understanding how your users are using your modules and collections to better understand workflows, cost management, etc. And again, this is your slow and steady. We want to make sure that Ansible Automation Hub is your, the de facto place for enterprises, enterprise users, to get content that is rock solid and fully supported. You'll start seeing some additional webinars around this. We're moving towards a general availability release for a lot of the life cycles and support around this. We'd like to have the content that Ansible distributes and writes to be supported for at least 2 years, right? We weren't able to do that with Galaxy, but we will be able to do that with Automation Hub. So stick around and stay tuned later this year for more information around that. Next slide. Okay, so let's see, what does this mean with ACI? Everyone's here for ACI, and I know we're going to get to it, only a few more minutes of me, and you're going to hear the good stuff. So before you understand that, before you hear about that, you have to understand, what does Cisco ACI look like now that it's outside of the distribution, right? We talked about Galaxy, we talked about Automation Hub. Where is this stuff? So you can see that we now have the concept of namespacing. Namespacing is typically where the top level vendor is, and we've actually utilized Cisco as a top level namespace. So you'll start to see what we call a fully qualified collection name. So at the very bottom, you'll see namespace.collection.asset, right? It could be a module, a plugin, whatever. So you typically say, when you actually reference, let's say you're running Ansible today, you're typically used to running or executing the ACI tenant module, right? In the future, you'll be able to say cisco.aci.aci tenant, and that will be very specific. That's your fully qualified collection name. Very similar to Automation Hub as well. So this is actually very, very similar. It's still cisco.aci.aci tenant. It's just you get your API key differently. Your download location is a little different. Content may or may not be the same, depends on the life cycle of the actual content. But this is where you actually will download the content specifically from Automation Hub. So this is what it's going to kind of look and feel. So as we move forward. Next slide. So here's the TLDR. I'm not going to go into this. You can also take a look. So if you're a developer of Ansible content, this is typically what you would do for collections. You would do an init. You would initialize a collection by doing, and everything, by the way, is through the Ansible-Galaxy command line tool. This is your gateway into initializing, building, distributing, publishing, and then actually downloading content from either Galaxy or Automation Hub. So this is, you initialize the collection. It's got a format. It's got like a schematic. It's got a skeleton. You just kind of fill in the blanks. You do your sanity testing. That's probably the bare minimum. We would recommend doing unit tests and integration tests in addition, right? Who doesn't like quality code and quality playbooks, quality content? So make sure you do that as part of developer. Once you actually have your collection ready to go from source, then you hit the build. And when you actually build the collection, it will generate the tarball that actually has everything as part of the collection that can be distributed, or it can then be published to Galaxy and or Automation Hub. So it's there. And then if you're a user, number 7 here is, if you're just a user of content, this is how you install a collection, right? So you do Ansible Galaxy collection install, and then you do cisco.aci, right? That's how you're going to get the actual Cisco ACI collection. So that's very in a nutshell. All of this stuff, this is very slimmed down. We have a developer guide on Ansible.com to take a look on our docs section. If you're interested in how to develop a collection or use a collection, we actually have guides there. So we didn't want to go too much into that here. Next slide. There we go. All right. So that's it for me. You don't have to hear about me anymore. I'm gonna hand it over to Lionel, and he's gonna start talking about Cisco ACI and then give you a demo. Thanks, Lionel.
Thanks, Andres. Hi, everybody. So I'm going to talk a little bit about ACI, and then I'm going to jump into showing you the collection because I think that's the most interesting piece. So let's start a little bit about Cisco ACI. So Cisco ACI is our multi-cloud networking solution from Cisco, and it started in the data center and expanded, but the main goal is to provide consistent security and connectivity policies across the different places where your data center today runs. The idea is also to provide a single pane of glass and automation across those different environments. One of the key concepts in ACI is that you don't talk to each of the switches that you manage. You talk to a controller, which in fact abstract all of those switches and create one large logical switches. So it's like you would have one gigantic switch that you can stretch wherever you want, and you always talk to it through a consistent API that you can easily automate. And the good thing is that that's link us directly into Ansible and allowing us to provide the additional level of automation through Ansible and connect that to your different other pieces of your infrastructure that you manage through Ansible. If we look at the ACI lifespan and what we have been doing of ACI over the last 6 years, is that we started in the main data center, the middle piece there, which is where most of our customers have their data center. But we have seen people evolve the data center outside of the normal confine of a physical data center into what we call remote locations, smaller sites, co-location facilities. And then we expanded that also into the public cloud, where we have people wanted to connect Azure, AWS, or other cloud providers together. And so through those various versions of ACI that I'm showing here and the various capabilities we have bring with multi-site, with virtual ACI, and with cloud ACI, we are now able to provide this connectivity across all of those elements. And this really brings me to show you the value of this. We are providing a consistent configuration way for all of those devices. And then that consistent way is managed in a fashion that's easier to automate for people. So we have a great API that can be used by everybody, and that's what we are using in our collections. Now, if I dive a little bit lower, because I want to explain you a little bit of how do we stretch across those different domains. One of the constructs I want to mention is the multi-site orchestrator. So we have two levels of management, if you want, in the ACI world. Epic is our controller, which manages a local fabric or a bunch of switches together. It also has a cloud version, which we call Cloud Epic, which can manage the networking in one of the clouds. The multi-site orchestrator is another level of abstraction on top of it, which can manage those different pieces. This is important because depending on your use case, you might want to talk directly to the Epic, or you might want to automate to the multi-site orchestrator. In this demonstration, I'm going to show you a bit later is that I'm going to talk about both. So I'm going to run through both of them and show you what's the difference, what do you do where, and what do you do for each. But in a nutshell, Epic will manage the local stuff like interfaces, like where you connect elements in your data center, where the multi-site orchestrator will manage the more logical elements that you want to extend or stretch between those different data centers. So that's really the key points in between those different elements. Now, why are we here today? Why are we as Cisco and Ansible joining together to deliver this content? One of the key pieces is that we think that people will move towards what we call infrastructure as code, which is an automated way of deploying your technology stack, not just the networking, but the whole stack. That makes more robustable. You can manage this in source versioning and rely on best practices that have been used in the software industry. We think that's really a big element. And because people are using tools already, we want that you add the network into your existing tool sets. We don't want you to use different tool sets to manage the network. If you're already using Ansible to manage your server configuration, maybe your deployment of your application, the network should just come in. That will help your team, that will move all the teams together We'll avoid division, and it will really create a consistent experience across all of the domains. It doesn't matter if it's compute domain or not compute domain, if it's networking, so it doesn't matter. You use a consistent experience, systems, and elements. Now, one of the things I want to so one of the elements we've been working on that in Cisco is a large portfolio of collections. So some of those are already available today in modules. But if you are moving to 2.9, as Andres said, we have to provide them as collections because that also allows us to develop more and innovate more. So if we look at what we already have today, on the left side, you will see the three collections that were already published today. So we have the NXOS modules. If you want to talk to a specific switch outside of ACI, we have those modules available. There's more than 80 modules there. And if we look at more the ACI side, we have the API controllers modules, which we call ACI, which are in the Cisco ACI collection, and it's mostly using the API of the APIC. We have more than 65 modules. And then on next to that, we have the multi-site orchestrator, which is, as I said, that managers of multiple APICs. And it provides around 30 plus modules today. This is a different collection. It sits around the Cisco MSO collections, but they live in different collection names so that we can manage them separately. Now, if you have a request if you are using them, if you have questions, if you have requests on new modules, don't hesitate to reach us to the GitHubs. We have put the links a little bit later. You can request new modules and elements. We would greatly want to hear back from you. On the right side, you are seeing what we are working on right now. So aside from managing and adding more to the existing REST collections, on the right side, we are today working on releasing a DCNM collection, so a collection to manage our other network manager, so that DCNM, Data Center Network Manager. And then we're also working into integrating our network assurance engine, which is our, if you want, verifier of configuration to your tool set. So why are we doing that? Our goal is that we should provide you a way that before you push the change config you are building through Ansible, we want you to verify this configuration change through our network assurance engine to make sure that this is not going to break your network or there is no overlap of subnets or anything you would have built in there, and that might happen if you push that through. And we don't really want you to do that manually. So because Ansible allows us to generate the configuration for ACI, we can push it to a network assurance engine, and we will then be able to decide if we go forward and push it to APIC or MSO or not. So this is really the next step into the evolution of our collections. Okay, so I've covered what's basic of ACIs, why are we doing this, what is the collections that we have and what we are planning to do. Now I wanted to discuss a little bit more about how do you start to use the ACI Ansible collections. Like what's the best way, what do you do? And this will lead me into our demonstration on how to do those different steps. So my big comment is that you should start simple. Like don't try to automate the moon first. Just pick one task, pick a task that you want to automate. What we have seen customers generally want to do is repetitive tasks, right? So interface configuration, if you want to configure a ton of interfaces the exact same way, that's one way on APIC. Another way is to build a cookie cutters templates, like a tenant, a VRF, or an EPG, which is some of our constructs, and you want to replicate that for 10 customers or 10 different divisions in your company. This is a very easy way in there. And then the last one is I want to assign different ports to VLANs to EPG. So I want to mess with where do I deploy my network. And that's the third one where people manually would do those steps. So for those three tasks, those are really where I would start. I would pick a task that I don't want to do over again and over again, and then I will automate it. And then when you have automated those tasks, then try to see what other tasks adjacent to it or what requirements you may need to that. So start to stitch them together. Like I will build the interface configuration that I need before assigning the VLAN into it, right? So this is really the way I would start my project and the way we are going to start these elements. So let's stop talking about it. Let's do it. Let's work together into building this, this automation. So I'm going to jump out of the slide and jump into my setup. So just to get you a little bit started, so this is my my desktop. We can see that I have already started an Ansible project. So I have an inventory file, I have my playbook, and then I have some variable that I have defined. So if we look quickly at my inventory file, it's a very simple inventory. It only contains APEC right now. It's just very simple. I didn't put the variables to connect to APEC in there. I've put everything in my variable files, which contain everything you need to connect. I'm currently using, I will show you later, I'm currently going to use password authentication, but later on I'm going to show you how we can evolve this. Now, if I take one simple task, and the task I told you, for example, that a lot of people do is configure an interface configuration. And so here I've picked up one of the tasks that I usually have to do a lot and repetitively, which is configure a virtual port channel. Because the port channel requires you to create a different configuration for every port that groups them together, right? So every group requires this configuration. So for that, I have to create this element manually. And if we look, for example, in APEC, let me just log back in. So this is our APEC, this is our management controller. So I will just jump directly into my interface. So I'm going to show you where I should normally develop this. And so normally I would go here, and for every group of interface, I will run through the creation of this element. There's a lot of fields that you can fill. Not all of them are important. So in this case, I will go here and create each of them. Now, I don't want to do that. I want to manage my infrastructure as code, and so I want to manage everything through Ansible. So the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to get my terminal. I'm going to install Ansible 2.9. So in my case, I'm working in a virtual environment. So in my virtual environment, I'm running Ansible 2.9.7. And then on top of that, I have installed the collection. So I have used the Ansible-Galaxy collection install, and I have used Cisco ACI. So it automatically downloads the latest one from Galaxy or from Automation Hub, and then it stitch your system and allow you to use it. So after that, it's very simple. You can just create a playbook, and in your playbook, you can just call our module. In this case, our module is called ACI Interface Policy Group, which is just the name of the object we're trying to create. Because in ACI, every configuration is nothing more than an object in a tree. That's what we call it. We call it the management information tree, and that's really the whole configuration is just objects. In this case, we have a few parameters that we need to use. So we will define where do we connect and how do we connect. We will use password authentication as first. As I use the self-signed certificate on my APEC, I need to disable the verification, and then I'm using a few settings. The lag type nodes allows me to create a VPC, so a multi-chassis link aggregation, if you don't know about a VPC, and then a few settings, the name of the server, the configuration I want. Those are related configuration that I'm referencing to make sure that it's using the correct elements. Let's try it, right? Let's try to run it. So just before I run it, I just want to make sure that everything is correct. So I have built a source repository. I'm checking that everything is done. So the change I have made, the creation of this playbook is saved in source repository. So now I can call it. So let's just do that. So let me call my playbook, which is called ACI.YAML. So once I call the Ansible.YAML, it's going to go and it's going to push my port group. So if I go back here, we should see after a few seconds that it comes back and it created it. If you look at the parameters we have passed, they've been created and creates that. That's kind of easy, right? This is just creating an Ansible playbook with one element. The value is that we should be able to easily scale this. The goal would be to, what should I be able to do if I want to add not 1, but 10 servers? So one of the things you could do is you could, for example, add a with sequence element, which will allow you to loop through 1 to 10 with a format of server. I have to edit my server policy group here to make sure that I'm using the name, and then I can just try to create 10 of them. So let me save this. Let me make sure that everything is correct. So I have a file to add, and I'm gonna commit git commit. New servers, want to go faster. Okay, so I'm good. Now I push, right? So I always commit so that I have a trace of what I've done and I can go back and everything. So let's push. I repush it. Now I use a loop. So the with sequence is a loop. So it's gonna go through and create each of them. We see that the first one was already there because I already created it before, but then it started to create the other one. So if we go back to Epic, we can see that it's gonna start to create each of them. We see them here first, and then it's gonna refresh the whole table after. So I have very easily now stretched from creating 1 VPC for 1 server to 10 VPCs for 10 servers. Now, this is good if your servers are called server 1 to 10. Most of people have servers with names. They like them. It's more like pets than cattle, right? So they want to be able to name them. And also, this is very, those tasks are sequential. Because it's a loop, it will do one task after each other. What we want is we want to use the power of Ansible to be able to move our tasks in parallel. So let's do that. So what we can do is add a few servers to our inventory. Just for a shortcut, I'm using this to make them, to create them. So I'm just adding a few servers in my inventory. Now, if I go back here, this is not going to work anymore. So I'm just going to change to servers. And then I'm going to change the naming. I don't need my sequence anymore, but I do need to change a few things. Now that I'm using another resources server, I have to delegate to localhost, right? I have to make sure that I run it for myself. So because if not, because I'm using a controller, I don't connect to the server and do something. And then I need to change this because this is not what I need. I need to use the inventory else name to push it. Okay, we are good. Let's check our source. Okay, and then let's run our playbook. Now, what it's going to do is that it's going to start creating those 10 other servers. What did I do? Let me check.
While he's checking that, you can see in some of the playbooks, you can see where the collections are being actually defined. So previously, you would just see ACI interface policy, leave policy group. You can see it's actually fully qualified there as part of the actual task. And you could actually set up, you could actually keep your same syntax. And actually, there's a new area. You can actually have a collection section of your playbook. So if all of your tasks are coming from the same collection, it will actually pull from there. So there's two ways of actually referencing collections. This way that Lionel has done is fully qualified for each task, or you could actually have it actually referenced playbook wide using the collections keyword above the tasks themselves. So I'm stalling here to hopefully he can get the demo gods back on his side, but as you can see from the playbooks, it looks very, very similar in a collections world, right?
Yes, I'm trying to get the demo gods with me, but they are not very happy right now. Let me see if
the idea is that some folks writing in, it could be the host line or the host name. Change the host name. host not be SEO. Let's see.
Host not be.
This is good.
Yeah, but that's. So this is just the cleanup. I'm just making sure that I'm just running that. Let me rerun the right playbook. Okay, so that's interesting. Let me try something very quickly.
Yeah, we've got time. So this is actually it's this is good, right? This is real world.
Okay. Yes. Collections. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just going and I'm gonna make sure that I'm using the right collection. So I'm gonna do this, and then I'm gonna do Ansible Collections. It's Ansible Galaxy Collection install Cisco ACI. Okay, let me do that. Into another magic window.
So as he does that, we want to make sure you all understand that a lot of this stuff is also available online. A lot of resources. Not sure if you saw, there are a couple of blogs that went out this week. One was on Cisco side, cisco.com. We published one around Ansible Tower, utilizing ACI as an inventory as part of Ansible Tower. So we actually have some new content from on the blog side. If you're looking for more information around ACI and Ansible, so there's some stuff out there. One question that came up actually is, and maybe Robbie, if you could come off mute, was if there was some ACI content plan queued up for Cisco Live. I know Cisco Live is going to be a virtual event here coming up. Is there going to be some of this stuff as part of Cisco Live?
Yeah, so you want me to answer that?
Sure.
Yeah, so we have a digital Cisco Live event, and we have lots of people registered, several thousand. So one of the interesting things that we are offering to customers attending the digital event is, a DevNet, sponsored demo session on network automation, data center network automation, and we are including the ACI Ansible as part of that. So definitely, there will be a lot of exciting opportunities for attendees in this webinar, and if they happen to attend the Cisco Live digital event, look up to some cool things in the demo. Yeah.
Cool, thanks. Looks like you have Lionel, you have hosts set to servers right there on your screen. Hosts are set to servers.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah, that should be correct. So normally I should be able to run this for every task, and then I only, but this is not correct.
Yeah.
But it still doesn't, it's okay. Let's, I will check that. Let's step forward, and I will move to the next step and start to explain it, and then see if the demo gods gets with me. So while I start progressing. So normally this should have created you in parallel. You see it execute way faster. It's just go that. One of the things you will face as an issue is in terms of the authentication. Let's just move. So I'm just going to move to the next one. So one of the things you can do is change the so what you can do is to change to certificate authentication. What you would have seen if that demo would have worked is that some of them would have worked and others would have failed through authentication issue, because ACI has a rate limiter on the number of connections. So if you start to do like a lot of parallel stuff with the ACI connection, it's good to switch to certificate-based authentication, because in that case, we just authenticate the certificates and we can increase the number of parallel connections. So this would make you able to do the same thing, and be able to do those in parallel. So I'm just going to retry it once, but I don't think it's going to go through this time either. Yeah, I still have. Let me just check, because that might just be what's annoying me. Anyway, so this is just allowing you to do those elements together and being able to create those different connections between the elements. Now, the next step that I was talking about earlier, right, is if I want to set it up, I have built one element. Now I want to grow it. And one of the ways you can grow it here is that you have related policies here that have been created and that you might want to develop. And so one of the elements you can do is you can look at building that related policy. So I did it earlier, and that's why I'm just going to check out the branch that's available. The code will be available for you after it when I fix it. And so you can start to build the related missing pieces. So earlier we were giving you a relation to this policy, which is a CDP policy. And then now here I can build my CDP policy. I can say I want both enable and disable to be available. So you can build each of the pieces and start to make them work together. So in this case, I'm stitching the different pieces together so that when it pushes the configuration, you have a complete configuration that starts to build up. Now, this is really the main piece of the ACI, right? You take the elements you want to automate, and then you move them into your playbook. And then when you have pushed that playbook, you make sure that it works and it's repeatable. Now, now that I have shown you this, I'm going to move into the MSO section, right? So this is really on ACI, so it goes into directly the ACI fabric and it creates it for you. And then now we're going to go into the multi-site orchestrator, which is its own set of API, which allows you to manage more than one ACI location. The construct here are slightly different, so you have to get through that. But if you are used to multi-site orchestrator, you will be fine. So the first one that we're going to do is you have to create tenants, the same way you would do it on-prem. And so this is the first step, right? We are doing that second. So earlier I was talking about a few use cases. The second one is the cookie cutter template. And for example, the first thing you do in your cookie cutter template will be to create a tenant. So to be able to do that, what I'm just going to do is I'm going to go and check out my branch. Just give me 1 second. Okay, so I'm going to go and check out the branch which has my MSO element in there. Let's check out MSO. And so there you will see now I have a new MSO file. And if you look at this template, it's very simple. Again, one task at a time, you start and then you build up from there, right? So the first element that you do is you fix this MSO, so you fix that. Now, I'm not calling directly the fully qualifying domain collection name where I was doing here. Another way you can call the collection is just reference it when you load the playbook. So in this playbook, I can just refer to cisco.mso, and then every time I call an element, it refers to cisco.mso. It's also a way to shorten them because they can become quite long, at least in our case, because we have long names. So if I take this and we have a look at the inventory, now I have just my MSO. This is the only one I'm running. And so we can just start and run this playbook. And I hope that the gods are back with me. So we can see that now it's changed. It has put the change to MSO. If I come to MSO and I refresh my page, you will see that the tenant A has been created. So same thing, right? I've created a tenant. I could do a loop now and create 10 of them. I could do a system and create 100 of them. But the idea is that I can easily create any elements that I know by referencing the right module. Now, what I want to do now is I want to build on top of that. I want to add this next piece of it. And the next piece in MSO is you would go to schema and you click add schema. And then it will ask you to pick a tenant. So what I want to do is add these pieces. So let me just check out my next piece, which is the schema piece. Let's just get this running. And so I'm going to pick the schema. And so you will see that here I now have, if I go in my MSO, I now have my MSO tenant, which I already had. And now I have a simple schema that I create. And I'm just using an anchor here to avoid repeating some of the element because all of those parameters are available here automatically. So let's push this, right? So this is just a schema with a single template inside it. So now it has already created. It had already created the tenant, so it doesn't need to recreate it. So now if I go here and I refresh, we should see the template. So we can see that this template is for tenant A with the template 1. So I've done my second step, right? I have built another one which is linked to the first one, and now it's kind of simple. It's just a few ones, right? Let's get an example which is pretty which is more involved. Let's go to the full schema. So I build the full schema system. If you just check it out here, it will create everything you need. So if you know about ACI, you will need a VRF, which is your layer 3 domain. You will need a bridge domain, which is your layer 2 boundaries. And so it's a bridge domain. And then in that bridge domain, I have a subnet. In ACI, we don't have a concept of VRP or like redundancy. It's also what we call anycast gateway. So you define it once and it's available everywhere. And then I have an application network profile and a few EPGs. I don't want to configure each of them, so I just created a small loop. So let's see it in action. Right. So for everyone, every time I do a change, I commit the change. That's why you have seen me get around the checkout and using different branches. It was just for me to make it easier and normally avoid issues. So that now I'm creating the different elements that is a larger playbook, right? I'm going more towards the automating the whole system. So if I go back here and I go back in this guy, you can see that now it's filled up with the different information. Now, if I needed to create another one, identical template, which is not called hybrid card, but hybrid card 2 or anything else, I can just copy this and just change and replay it with another name. And we have made some roles and we are working on additional roles for you to be able to use that in a more easy way. So you don't have to necessarily write the logic, but you just put a good inventory together and then it pushes all the changes. So that's kind of the different elements I wanted to mention. Now, there is one element I wanted to add on the ACI collection, is that and the MSO collection. We didn't build for every little nooks and crannies possibilities of the platforms yet, the modules. We are looking for you to know which modules you need, and we can build additional modules. We are not limited to the modules we have. So open an issue on our GitHub to see any issues. If you have any modules you want, there is a catch-all module for ACI, which is called ACI REST or _REST, which allow you to do any request to any of the modules. You just have to pass either in YAML or in JSON format the payload you want to send. And so it's a good way to build in between until we have released the modules you need. Okay, but don't hesitate to let us know which module you need. Okay, so that's wrap up the demo. So a little bit on that. But what can you do now? What do you do after this? Right. So there's the code of the demo. If you find error I made, let me know. So you can find that code there. There is a lot of resources in the Cisco side around the DevNet and what we call the learning labs in DevNet, which is a place where you can learn about any Cisco products, programmability, and how to automate it. And we have a great one around an intro to ACI with Ansible. It tells you how to use our sandbox, which is an online version of our controller so that you can just try it and test it. We also have a simulator available for the Epic that's available for our customers. So just reach out to your Cisco contacts for that. You have the links for all the collections. We accept PRs if you want to contribute. This is also an open source project, so we will review them and give you feedback. But we are always open for that. There's also a blog that Ravi wrote a lot of those details. Just a quick summary of the collections. So the one you saw today was the Epic ones, the MSO ones. I didn't do the NXOS ones, but it's available. Don't forget about it. And then I just wanted to let you know that we are soon gonna release the DCNM and the Network Assurance Engine one. So look out for it. Look out for the content we are gonna release in the next few weeks around it. Andres?
Yeah,
I know you wanted to.
Yeah, I wanted to before I plug Ansible Fest, I wanted to make sure around NXOS we actually did a Net DevOps Live set, season 3. Hank Preston, if you know him, I think most people do. Season 3 is happening right now. We were in episode 1 talking about Ansible network automation. If you're interested in NXOS resource modules, you can take a look at that. So don't want to forget about the other side of the house here with NXOS. So loving the ACI stuff. Thank you so much. And then the NXOS. And then I got to get into the plug now for Ansible Fest. We just announced it yesterday. It is going to be virtual, no surprises. But we actually have a call for papers. It's open. So if you are someone who uses ACI or Cisco technologies with Ansible, we'd love to hear your story and see if you want to actually present and tell your story as part of our virtual experience of Ansible Fest later this year. So that just opened today, and it'll be open for the next 2 months or so. But don't wait around. We start accepting as we go. So feel free to go to Ansible Fest, ansible.com/AnsibleFest, and take a look at that. That's all I wanted to say there, and then we can go into some Q&A. There was one question here in the session: Is the ACI API always backwards compatible? That is, assume the APIC is upgraded. Does that mean that the Ansible module doesn't work anymore, for example?
So it should be always backward compatible. Now, we are not free of bugs. It could be, but you should consider that a bug, and please open issue with us. We will fix it. So normally it should be, so they should be always compatible with the forward versions.
So as long as the module was in the collection is still supported, not deprecated, it would still be supported through the API.
Yes, correct.
That's basically the way to say that.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yep.
Another question was how you actually touched on a little bit about how to get support for ACI collections. You saw the links there. If you're an Ansible subscriber, you can actually submit a support case through Ansible, and we will work directly with Cisco to actually fix the issue. So if you're a Cisco customer as well as an Ansible customer, you can also do it that way as well. If you're not an Ansible customer, you'd be able to file a case or file an issue in GitHub as Lionel stated.
So Andreas, there is one more question that came up, which is, can we install the collections in any location besides the default location, which is Ansible/collections,
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. So we're moving forward. We know that virtual environments are kind of hacky. It's the only thing we got today. But we're moving towards a kind of a cloud native Ansible world. So later this year, now that we have 210 base, a very slimmed down version of Ansible, we will be able to containerize that instance and virtualize it the right way, and that'll be called an execution environment. So moving forward, you'll start hearing this. There's some PRs in Ansible GitHub working towards committing what an execution environment is, and that's going to be the future de facto way of containing having an actual virtual environment across your control node. So hopefully that helps.
Okay. Sure.
And just to add there's an option right now on the Ansible-Galaxy collections to just precise that you want to install it somewhere else. That's a possibility.
We only have a few minutes left. Wow, all the questions come in right when we're about to stop. Oh, you guys have really good questions. What are you doing to us? Okay. How can you contribute? How do you contribute and develop to the collection? What's the best way to do that? Through GitHub, right, Lionel?
Yes, for the Cisco collections, the best way is through GitHub. Open a PR against an issue or just comment. You can also reach to me. I think my contacts will be in the repos. So just contact me if you have questions. But yeah, just the GitHub is the way.
Okay. And we're gonna have to do one more question. We're gonna have to jump here. So the question was, do you recommend a collection rather than roles? And it's honestly, a collection contains roles. So standalone roles aren't going away anytime soon. So if you're developing roles and publishing them to Galaxy, that's totally fine. We're moving towards having everything as part of collections. So the goal is to be able to have collections as the de facto kind of framework to delivering content. So it's not really a recommendation of either or. The collections are the future though, because you're able to contain more things than just roles. But roles by themselves aren't going away anytime soon. Hopefully that helps. Oh, and by the way, there was a question around collections. It's not 2.10 and newer, it's 2.9 and newer. So feel free to use collections. So if you're using the ACI modules today, you can use the ones that are built in to 2.9, or you can use the ones, you can install 2.9 and just utilize the ones that are part of the collection that you would download separately. So you can actually kind of switch it on and off, right? But when we hit to 2.10, you will have to install that if you're just running Ansible 10 base, 2.10 base, or you have to wait for 2.10, the distribution, to have all of that. So just a reminder, 2.9 and newer is what collections are supported against. And I think that's all we have time for. We're really happy to have you. Thank you so much. We would love to do this again. Let us know how we did. And we'll see you at Cisco Live Virtual. We'll see you at Ansible Fest Virtual. And we want to keep the Cisco ACI love going with Ansible. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you so much for the presenters and all the attendees. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.